For the making of this video podcast, I want to specifically thank the Wright Brothers Flight Technology Company from Hoofddorp in the Netherlands. They made this beautiful simulator, Boeing 737 simulator, available. And the first time I sat in the simulator, I was astounded by the exact copy of a 737 cockpit. But what even more got me was the outside look. When a pilot looks through the window, what he sees is the real world. What they projected on a screen outside the flight deck, what we see through the windows, is just absolutely amazing. The clarity, the detail of the vision is so astounding. I was flabbergasted. So it's a beautiful product. Wright Brothers Flight Technology of Hoofddorp, the Netherlands. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because for the next 12 months we will be in this beautiful simulator producing amazing content. Hello Martin, welcome to the third Palfarmer Aviation podcast, recorded live here, a video podcast, and man, that's a scoop, that's a first, recorded in the 737 cockpit here in just outside Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You can see it on the smile on my face, a big smile on my face. This is very impressive. You know, I've constantly got the feeling that I'm in an airplane on a certain altitude.
You are. As you look out the windows, they put us at 2,000 feet over the coastline of the Netherlands, and where you can see the beaches. There's the Formula One circuit. There's a topless beach down there. I used to buzz that. There's over there. There's the president of our company lives in his beautiful apartment on the beach, and and the vision is fantastic. The visibility is unlimited. The clear blue sky. A great day for flying.
Yeah.
Welcome, man.
I'm just constantly thinking to myself, if you have your license and it's the first time you fly an airplane like this.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, well, you already flew it, because otherwise you wouldn't
have
have
737. You won't fly your private pilot license in a 737.
Let me be impressed, hey? Come on.
There you go.
Because you fly 777s and whatever. This is the first time for me to be in a cockpit whatsoever.
Yeah, it is. It always, it makes a deep impression on people, especially all the switches and everything and whatnot. But hey, remember what we last talked about in the first podcast at the end, that I wanted to talk about a certain disease that sometimes takes possession of pilots, which is actually very dangerous.
Well, we talked about it later on. It's not only pilots who have that syndrome, right? I call it the syndrome nowadays.
Yeah, well, other people can have it too, but when a pilot has it, it's very dangerous. I'm talking about get-home-itis.
Get-home-itis, yeah.
Yeah, you have meningitis and appendicitis, but this is a disease where the pilot wants to get home. Let me explain. You fly from A to B, and we are programmed to land at B, airport B. And we have a flight plan. We are preparing ourselves for the approach, and we want to land at B. And then on the flight plan is also stipulated, legally required, an alternate airport called C. Let's say you flew into Amsterdam as your destination, then Rotterdam might be your alternate, or Brussels. But you really don't want to go there. You want to go to your destination. Now, when get-home-itis takes place in the brain of the captain, which is in all the crashes in the past have always been male pilots, he basically...
Is it a typical male thing?
You would almost think so. You would almost think that the female pilot has more of a common sense to get the hell out of Dodge when trouble hits. So what happens when get-home-itis? Suppose we were flying in here, and all of a sudden a huge thunderstorm moves overhead, and there's hailstones the size of golf balls, and it's raining cats and dogs. There's wind shear. Basically all red flags saying don't land here. Another thing that always comes into the fray is that when you in hindsight look back on when something goes wrong, the pilots of other airplanes, they usually divert. They go to their alternate airport, and they say, let's get the hell out because it's too dangerous. Sorry?
Yeah, not airport B, but airport C.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens with get-home-itis, the captain is hell-bent on landing that airplane. Why? Maybe just before he took off from, I don't know, London Stansted, he got a message that his wife is in the hospital, or some very banal reason he wants to be at the soccer match of his son, which is the last in the season, and he's missed already 4, and his wife had looked at him like, blaming him
If
for
you
not
do
being
that one
there.
more time, you better come home, boy. Something
exactly.
like that.
Yeah. So he presses on, and then often the co-pilot goes along in it, and they land somewhere halfway down the runway, and they don't have enough runway to stop on, aquaplaning, standing water, tailwinds, wind shear, and they run off the end of the runway. And a lot of times the airplane breaks up, catches fire, people die. And this get-home-itis has been, going on since the early days of commercial aviation, since the Second World War. If you look that far back, crashes have happened because of that. And they usually happen during landing.
And
one time they happened actually during takeoff.
Yeah, wasn't that with in Mallorca or something with the KLM flight?
Tenerife.
Tenerife.
Yeah, Tenerife.
There was a
KLM Pan Am. The KLM captain had a severe case of get-home-itis because they were flying Amsterdam, Gran Canaria, and then divert from Gran Canaria to Tenerife, their alternate airport, because they couldn't land at Gran Canaria. They were supposed to offload and upload cruise ship passengers. So they went to Tenerife, but there was a dense fog. And then he calculated that they were running out of legal work time, duty time. So he was in a major hurry to get back to Gran Canaria when the airport was open. Change passengers, offload, upload, and get fuel, and then get the hell out and make it to Amsterdam inside the legal duty hours of, let's say, 12 hours. And every minute time was ticking away that they were on the ground in Tenerife. So he was in a major hurry to take off, and he disregarded he disregarded their own safety procedures. Did not ignore the warning of his flight engineer, and the rest is history. Terrible.
Yeah, because I was thinking to myself, because that's when they take off. But if you want to land, there's also something like flight control, right? And are they not saying, okay, it's not safe, you can't land?
No, this is the responsibility of the pilot. Sometimes it happened, like in Miami in the hurricane season, that they will close the airport if they have very sophisticated warning systems, low-level wind shear advisories, blah blah blah. They will close the airport, but some don't, and they leave it to the pilot, and they have the responsibility to make that final decision. Now, if the captain is hell-bent on getting there, and the co-pilot does not stand up to him and say, listen, buddy, use common sense, we have to get the hell out, it's dangerous. Sometimes even the passengers do it. You remember this with JetBlue, what happened in New York last year?
I just want to say, I remember
incredible. I was
just on YouTube. That the passengers were upset.
The passengers were revolting, and what happened? There was a delayed flight inbound to JFK, winter weather, and they made 4 approaches. After you made a second approach trying to land as a pilot, you already should start wondering, what am I doing here? Then they made a third and a fourth approach, and then they diverted to another airport. I believe it was Newark, and the passengers by that time were so scared.
I can imagine, because you don't know what's going on, right?
They said, we want to get off the airplane. No, we will take you back to Kennedy. No, we want to get off. And people were yelling. There was complete, it was mutiny on that flight. And actually, I think, when your heart speaks and you are feeling that there's something not right, and you can almost sense the danger. And I'm thinking, listen to your inner self. And I respect what they did, the passengers. They actually did not, were not led like lambs to the slaughter. And I don't want to say sheep, but, Martin
It's got
sheep.
something to do with my last name, right?
Exactly. Monsieur Mouton. Well, anyway, there is one case of get-home-itis. And if you look back over the years, every year, a couple of airplanes, almost every year, crash, usually during landing. Killing people, killing the crew. Not all of them. Some of times they walk away without a scratch. But you see this flight deck here. We have 3 different autopilots. We have, you don't see it, but behind the switches overhead, we have 3 different backups for hydraulics, air system, fuel system, electrical system. So everything is.
So actually, what you're saying is you must be really stupid, or make some stupid choices before things really run out of control.
Well, you don't. It's not about choices, but if something fails, there's always a backup system that takes over. So you're not dependent on just one system that starts to leak or catches on fire. But with all this fantastic protection that is built into this airplane, there's nothing protecting us from what I call the runaway captain, who wants to land in bad conditions. Everybody's diverted, and this guy is just hell-bent on getting on the ground. jeopardizes the lives of all his passengers, his crew, the airframe, the plane. And so they there is nothing, and what bothers me is there's nothing in the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, in the airline industry that is being done about it.
That's really strange.
That's what amazes me, because I have checked down into the history, and some years there were 3 crashes all over the world happening when pilots actually continued when they should have gone away, and
So
they wrecked the airplane. People died. Sometimes they themselves died.
Oh wow!
And one was a plane from Dubai that landed in Rostov on the Don in Russia and tried to land. And for the 3rd time, they waited for 2 hours, burning fuel, trying to wait for the winds to abate. They went back in, and the 3rd time they made a go around, and the captain apparently he just froze up and thought, "Shoot, I'm trapped. I'm out of options," and he stopped flying, and the airplane stalled and crashed on the runway, and all people on board died.
Because I was just wanted to ask you, is there any attention from the aviation industry?
It doesn't look like it. I've written articles about it, and a lot of pilots agree with me. They say you're absolutely right, and
because it makes perfectly sense. I mean, it's a whole different story, of course, but I have the same experience with myself. Unfortunately, you come back from holiday, right? And actually, you should find a hotel and rest and move on the next day.
Yeah. You mean you got a long drive ahead?
Yeah, when you have a long drive ahead, but your brain is saying to you, "No, I want to go home."
Yeah, you're smelling the stables.
The holiday is already gone, so let's move.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that from my profession, we know that people show very irrational behavior. We know that. I mean, then you came and received a Nobel Prize for it.
Yeah.
So it's also a very irrational decision as a pilot to say, "Okay, I'm going to land in this weather no matter what because I want to go home."
Mm-hmm.
But it's
that's get-home-itis. It's something in his brain. There's a
but then there's no attention for it in the aviation industry. That's really wondering.
I've been saying why operations like KLM here on Schiphol Airport has a major operations center with people monitoring flights, and they should especially pay attention when their flights go into tricky airports. My friend flies a 777, and he flew it late in the afternoon into São Paulo in Brazil. And it's always bingo late in the afternoon. Hot weather, thunderstorms building up, and sometimes you're lucky. The airport itself is clear, but there's a thunderstorm 3-4 miles away. Okay, so you can land. And sometimes you are out of luck, and you have to enter a holding to wait for the weather to clear. Or if you don't have the fuel for that, you have to go to your alternate, because you have to keep an eye on that fuel figure that you have in your tanks that gives you enough fuel to reach that alternate. So if that operations of that airline knows that, Mexico City late in the afternoon is always tricky, always major thunderstorms and rain, and sometimes it bypasses the airport, and sometimes it happens right overhead the airport. Mm-hmm. At that time, when that pilot and his co-pilot, maybe there were 3 in the cockpit there for a long flight, they have that decision to them. What do? They have the most actual information there, but operations nowadays with the internet and weather radar and everything else, ATC, they can monitor also what is happening there. And at that moment, let's say this guy wants to land because he has a date in the city and he's going to meet the nice girl in the bar and he wants to land. And the co-pilot thinks, but the co-pilot is a youngish guy and he doesn't dare to speak up. And then all of a sudden, operations should pitch in and say, "What are you still doing there? We see other airplanes are diverting to Guadalajara or to Rio de Janeiro from Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
What are you still doing there? What does it look like? From our information, it doesn't look good. Maybe you should consider diverting."
So hierarchy in the cockpit plays a role then as well?
Oh, very much. I'll tell you one story that is absolutely amazing. Just a short break. Did you know that Wright Brothers Flight Technology is building flight simulators for flying schools, but also for major airlines, which are completely EASA certified? And now we get back to the podcast. Yesterday, or 13 years ago, that this crash happened, and it killed the president of Poland, Lech Kaczynski.
There was this twin, wasn't it?
With his wife, and
wasn't it about this twin brother who were both
politicians? They were twins, yeah. Lech and Yaroslav, and they are both. They had the Law and Order Party in still there in Poland, but they were flying from Warsaw Chopin Airport to Smolensk, just across the border in Russia. It was on a day to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Katyn Forest murder. Have you ever heard about that? The Katyn Forest?
Honestly, no? I can say yes, but if you ask me a question about it, I don't know. Got no idea.
Well, it was a thing that is beyond belief. Joseph Stalin basically had his Russian soldiers, murder the entire military hierarchy there, but also nobility, landowners, the ecclesials, the 22,000 people in that forest were shot in the neck and dumped in mass graves.
Okay.
And
they were on their way to the ceremony.
Yeah, and the commemoration of that night, I believe President Putin was going to visit there too. So they were flying in there Tupolev to Smolensk, and one of the other military airplanes just got in there with a load of journalists on board to report on this event. Mm-hmm. And they got in there, or they tried to get into Smolensk airport in dense fog. Now there were a lot of other very negative influences on the performance there. The radio navigation beacons on the airport, there was just one very basic beacon dating back from the Second World War. The instrument landing system that we have on the runway, that wasn't working. The lights, some of them were broken. Some of the runway approach lights were screened off by trees and shrubbery. The Russian controllers only spoke Russian. They offered a translator to be in the cockpit of that Polish Tupolev, but for some reason that didn't happen. Luckily, the captain spoke fluent Russian. But the worst thing was very dense fog, and they called their friends that had just landed before them, and they said it's absolute shit down here, it's only getting worse. Now the beacon that is on the airport, you can fly and approach that, but it's notoriously inaccurate, and you can only land with a certain minimum of maybe you need about 1,500 meters visibility.
What does a beacon do?
There's a beacon on the runway, next to the runway, that transmits 360 degrees around, all over on a low frequency, a signal. Mm-hmm. And if I tune that frequency here in one of these radio sets, it's called an NDB, that beacon, a non-directional beacon. One of the pointers over there will point at that beacon.
Ah, okay.
It will always point at that beacon.
So you know
where the airport is. That's
so
all
it's
you
like
know.
On the horizon over there. I don't know what it is, but
that's
it's
a runway.
That's the runway.
Yeah, you know where the airport is, but that's all you know. It doesn't give you a distance. It doesn't give you any other information. It just tells you that's on the nose. That's the
where
airport.
You should go.
Yeah.
But that beacon was not working properly.
It's very inaccurate. And the Russians had an instrument landing system that you can use to land even in dense fog, but they decommissioned that and then the Polish Air Force on that airplane had an ILS receiver that was only made for the Western Hemisphere. Not the Russian had a whole different frequency set that wouldn't work.
Oh my goodness.
So they are trying to get in there in very dense fog and trying to grope their way to the airport. They have 3 different altimeters in that cockpit, and they all gave different indications. Then the Russian pilot, radar controller, tried to help them to talk them through the fog to the airport. Then their own navigator started to call out altitudes from one of the altimeters, which is actually a completely non-standard procedure. And at the same time, they're trying to descend to the airport through the fog, but they don't have vertical guidance. If you have an instrument landing system on the primary flight display here on that horizon, you have a bar that moves up and down that tells you you're too high or too low to descend in a 3 degree. Yeah, you see the dots horizon there. Yeah, you have a 3 degree glide path that takes you to the runway. If you are high, the needle goes down to say you have to go down to get on that 3 degree path. But they did not have that guidance. Okay, so that NDB, that silly little beacon, didn't have that function. So they are basically vertically, in the vertical sense, they don't know where they are because they also have no exact distance to the airport. So they are just basically, winging their way through the fog. And if you're flying in the fog really like that, it's like you're flying in a bottle of milk. You don't see shit. The visibility had dropped down to 200 meters, which actually requires you to have a very sophisticated ILS system and not some shabby old beacon. But they did it anyway because that's what the colleagues on the ground say. Yeah, you might give it a try. But you know what? They had a general sitting in the cockpit, wanting to land. There was the director of the whole ceremony running in and out, saying we need to land. And of course, the president was on board, and they were going to meet the president of of Russia. They were under immense pressure from the higher ups, you know, the military or the president himself, to land that airplane, to be at that ceremony. And therefore, they basically ignored their own responsibility. That, you know, if it looks dangerous, it smells dangerous, it's bad, all the warning signs are, you know, flagging red, get out of there, then...
But what I always understood is that at the end of the day, the pilot, the captain is the boss of the airplane.
Yeah.
So if he or she decides
there is a cliffhanger here, you wouldn't believe what happened. 2 years before that, the same president who got killed in that crash went on a flight on the Tupolev, the government airplane, from Warsaw to somewhere in Poland, A to B, and somewhere halfway during the flight, according to the incident report, the background story in this incident report, he required the captain on that plane to go to another airport, to divert to another airport. The pilot, the captain, refused to do that because I don't have the navigation documentation for it. I've never been there. So we can't
problems perhaps with the fuel.
That could come into it too, but primarily because he didn't have any documentation on that airport. He was not familiar with it.
From the captain's perspective, it was a no-go.
Yeah, and he continued to the destination originally planned. You know what they did?
They fired him?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, they court-martialed him. They brought him to a military court according to what I read.
Because he refused to follow orders.
Yeah, exactly. He disobeyed orders. So basically what happened there is somebody else higher up is trying to sit on the captain's seat. And that higher up person has no clue what it means to fly an airplane.
What kind of international laws do you have on that? There must be something like international law where you say, okay, at the end of the day, what I always understood, but I'm a dummy in regards to aviation, the captain is the boss.
Yeah, well, he is responsible for the safe conduct of the flight. So if at any given time he sees that it becomes too dangerous to continue a flight or to even start a flight, then he says, okay, it's my responsibility. I am taking that responsibility. I'm not taking off. I'm not going to land there. So
Fair enough.
Your boss can yell at you all you want, and the good thing is here in Western Europe, many countries have very strong pilot unions, and those pilot unions will back you up and say to your boss, listen, you cannot do this. This guy is in his legal rights, and he is obligated to protect the passengers and the crew and the plane. So we know that as airline management, you don't tamper with the function of a captain, because that's specifically why he is a captain, to make those difficult decisions. That's why he gets paid all that money. But here, basically, somebody else went and sat on the captain's seat, that Polish captain, and told him, you are going to divert to that airport. And he said, no, I'm not. I will continue to my destination. He won the court-martial. They gave him a silver medal, but he never flew the president again.
Okay. Well,
but you know one thing?
He should be happy about that. Eh?
Yeah. He kept his back straight. But you know one thing? His co-pilot on that flight later got promoted to captain, and the flight engineer on that flight got promoted to co-pilot. And you know who were on the planes? The plane that crashed.
Let me guess.
In Smolensk.
Let me guess. Those guys.
So can you imagine the pressure they felt?
Yeah. They knew what would be at stake when they would say, okay, we're not going to do it.
Yeah. So they kept groping and poking around in the dense fog to get to that airport. And at one time they were descending so fast, they were completely unstabilized. They were in a valley short of the runway, and they just crashed into the forest, and everybody died. And if the guy had the right to exercise his command as a commander, as a captain, if he had done what he was trained to do, then he would have gotten the hell out, because other airplanes had also there was an airplane inbound from Moscow that went straight back to Moscow. They said, we're not going to do this.
Yeah.
And that is the common sense, but this guy had a case of the get-home-itis.
But what I do not get, because we know already for a long time, and it's not the first time we spoke about it. It's the first time, by the way, in a simulator.
Yeah, that's an absolute
in
first.
A podcast.
Yeah.
But what really amazes me is that, for me, it's quite obvious that companies can put a lot of pressure on pilots, their own feeling, their own irrational behavior. But there's not so much attention for it. That's what I find very strange. I already said
It
before,
also, again, there depends on culture. You know, Asian cultures, it is very hard to say no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they always say yes because they...
Because of giving face.
Yeah, losing face.
Yeah, losing face, yeah.
Other cultures, macho cultures, where, you know, saying no, you are a coward or a wuss, and they say... so they refuse to do that. They always say yes, and yeah, I can cope with this, and I can deal with this, and I know what I'm doing. So basically, they are, you know, overestimating their own capabilities.
Yeah, so they should good training on how to deal with your own ego, basically.
You know, we talked about that. That's that crew resource management that has been ever since that terrible crash in Tenerife been getting more and more important. You know,
what do you mean by crew resource
crew
management?
Resource management? We are a crew, okay, but the purser is also part of the crew, and the flight engineer, if you had one, but also the ground agent. They're all airline crew, and you manage the resources that they possess. So I flew for one time with Turkish Airlines in the Boeing 777 to Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. Never been there before.
Nice.
So I'm thinking, okay, former Soviet satellite. How would that look? And I checked all the navigation charts and familiarized myself. But there is nothing better than eyes on the ground. So I asked my co-pilot. I said, "Hey, Mehmet, how often have you been there? Or have you been there before?" And he said, "Yeah, I've been there 3 times." I said, "What do I have to pay attention to?" And that is crew resource management. You ask that guy for info.
But that's very normal, isn't it?
Yeah, but you wouldn't believe how you know, we talking about a gradient in the cockpit. In the Netherlands, the gradient is very shallow. We have the captain is almost on the level with the co-pilot, and the only difference is with the captain.
Only difference is the salary.
No, but the responsibility. The captain.
Bad joke, sorry. For those pilots who are listening, sorry, bad joke.
Yeah, well, actually, it's true. But the captain is responsible, and he puts his signature down on everything. And the co-pilot basically follows along. But if the co-pilot sees the captain making a mistake during the flight, during an approach or
he immediately says, "Hey, dummy,
yeah,
look at it."
Well, you know, in certain countries, for saying that, he would get smacked on the head with a checklist. But no, seriously, that happened. But hey, that is his function. The co-pilot also to protect the captain from making a mistake, and vice versa too. That is also crew resource management, which is called threat and error management. You try to isolate the threats and the errors from happening.
Yeah.
And that is, in a larger sense, crew resource management. And the most important thing is, and which we have a good culture for that in our country, is basically calling out a mistake, whoever made it, or admitting when you made one, and being willing to learn from it.
Yeah.
And there are, again, cultures who will completely ignore that they ever made a mistake and just sweep it under the carpet.
So it could be the case that the problem is even bigger than we think, because it depends on culture.
It's improving because there are more and more cultures that are noticing that their own culture is in the way, and they need to do something because they have had dangerous accidents or incidents where this crew resource management, the communication completely broke apart. And for example, here in this Polish crash in Smolensk, everything fell apart during the last second.
Nobody communicated.
And one at one time screamed, "Go around," and nobody did anything. And then 8 seconds later, the other said, "Go around," nobody did anything. It was, if you read that report, it was just one thing stacking up on another. It was Murphy's Law altogether, but the overruling mistake was the get-home-itis of the captain. And this time not because he wanted to land, but the pressure from higher up to land. And that's why I said, if you read that report with in the back of your mind what happened a couple of years before that, when they punished that captain for actually doing his job, then that's the kind of a culture that you don't want in the cockpit. definitely not. It's very dangerous. Very counterproductive when it comes to, when the shit hits the fan, Murphy's Law bites you with all its force, everything goes wrong. Then you, as a crew, have to, stick together and help each other and make a sound plan. And that is just same with this crew resource management. Some people, they refuse to admit that is a necessity. It's a bare necessity. It's much more important. We call it the non-technical skills. The technical skills is here handling all these switches and flying the airplanes. But
it's complicated to communicate. I mean, it's a different story, I think. But a management team needs to work together as well, and that's my field of business. Mm-hmm. And we have this it's an exercise where they need to work together to find out what's missing, and we put a lot of pressure on them. And in the beginning, everybody is shouting. And if there's one leader that everybody accepts, then they can fix it within 10, 12 minutes. Yeah. But if there are 2 or 3 big egos in the group, and sometimes that happens, it's a big failure. Because it goes all over the place. And then they're shouting, no, it should be done like this. No, it's like this. Okay, one more time. And nobody's thinking anymore.
Spins out of control.
Yeah, and the last 5 minutes, they say, guys, come on, you need to hurry up. But you've got only 10 minutes. And then it's like, it really happens that they look like...
Well, that's the funny thing is that a lot of the airlines nowadays... They have always in their selection process, so they invite for a certain day 12 new candidates to hire for a pilot. Yeah, and they will put them together in a room and give them a complex situation to solve, and then they will observe with a couple of shrinks who acts in which way. There are very quiet, subservient types. There are very aggressive types. There are nervous guys, and how do they behave, and do they listen to each other? And the funny thing is, what I've lately been thinking about more and more is one of the greatest dangers that we can make in our lives, in driving, in our relationship to other people, to your wife or your partner, or in a business or in a cockpit, is an assumption.
Yeah.
I always like that American
one-liner.
Assumption
is the mother of all,
all screw-ups. Yeah. Or if you analyze the word, you dissect the word.
You make an ass out of you and out of me.
Exactly. Assume you make an ass of you and me. Yeah. And the funny thing is, people in relationship think, kind of, he looked kind of funny at me. Yeah. So, well, and I would say, maybe he had a bug in his eye. It's an assumption. Yeah, but why don't we go talk to these people? Why don't we just ask? What's going on? What are we doing here? Why? And based on assumptions, so many things go wrong.
What do you think the role of artificial intelligence will be in this? Because if a plane will be run by artificial intelligence, you don't have get-home-itis. It's
well, you remember our second podcast I made with Ferry, ex-KLM, ex-Turkish Airlines captain, and we talked about the future of aviation.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah, I remember.
We were both of the opinion that the airline industry will eventually migrate towards flying a drone.
I can imagine, because...
And of course the pilots won't like to hear this, but the technology is already there. Yeah. The mindset has to change. That is the biggest thing. The people in the back have to understand it and accept it.
Yeah, but it's always a tipping point, right? As at a certain point, people have more faith and more trust in the technology. If you are flown by artificial intelligence, it's safer. At a certain point, people will say, okay, it's safer to fly with artificial intelligence.
Especially if you consider that 95% of all accidents are made by human error.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, wow. So that's the story I wanted to relate, that get-home-itis that nobody apparently addresses, because I bet you that this year it will happen again. There will still be somebody else somewhere in this world saying, I want to land, and then there is standing water, and there is snow, and there is hail, and there is thunderstorms, and God knows what. But and they will still press on, and it will wreck the airplane. The people will maybe die in the worst case. I think why it never gets much attention is that it's very cynical, but people don't die in very, very large numbers. Sometimes, like in our day, it happens in out-of-the-way countries, like the crash in the southern part of Russia, in Rostov. It's far away from us here in Western Europe. But if this would happen somewhere on an airport in our region.
In Dubai, for example. Or,
but even closer. Then
Munich.
it would hit home. Then you, of course, it's closer to home. But somewhere on the other side of the world, you think, third world country, But it can happen anywhere, and any pilot can get this crazy notion that he wants to land.
And it's not only, because I was thinking about it, it's not only pilots who can have this problem, but it's the same for truck drivers.
Of course.
Captains on a boat.
But like what you said about this vacation, I had the same thing a couple of years ago. I had this nice big solid Volvo SUV, and I'm driving all the way from Tuscany, and we decided at 5 in the afternoon to in the morning, we decided that we would stop over, I believe, in Bern in Switzerland, right? That's on the route if you come out of Italy.
For sure.
Get a hotel and with the kids and my wife and stay one night and just clip it in two. But then we were there, and it was only 6 hours more left to go, and it was 6 or 7 in the evening. And I'm feeling fit. I had a good night's rest, but I had already been driving. And driving in northern Italy is crazy. Then you go across.
If you're from Tuscany, I think you already did something like 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
A little bit less, 800-900.
And then same thing, get-home-itis. I talked to my wife, and she said, if you're happy, we're happy. We just keep on going. We'll be home at 1 or 2 in the morning. And I stayed alert most of the way, but you have this dark highway running parallel to the Rhine up north. Yeah. And there's no lights there, and then at one time you think like, shoot, I wish I had gone to that hotel, man. And that is,
it hits you just
like and then what do you do? Yeah. What is the wise thing to do?
But then it's so strange, because then the irrationality takes over. Then you're thinking to yourself, but I'm already driving, and I will get a cup of coffee later. I will put on some music. And it's all nonsense. Mm-hmm. It does not help you to stay awake.
You will only get more tired.
Yeah, but it's the same for a pilot, right?
And it's again also, this is one thing that may bring on get-home-itis is fatigue. When you've had a long ocean crossing flight of 12 hours, and then you think, in 2 hours I'll be in the hotel, have a nice cold beer, and go to bed, and then you're hell-bent on getting there.
Yeah.
And so then you're at the end of 12-hour flight, and you didn't sleep because when you had your little 2-hour block to have a nap, it was turbulent, and you were bumping all over the place in your bed, and you couldn't sleep. And then you get there, and your mind is clouded, your judgment is clouded by fatigue, by tiredness. And you think, what the hell? I'm not going to go divert from Amsterdam to Brussels, and then maybe we run out of time, and the passengers have to go to a hotel, and you think of all this hassle that is behind it, because that is what that KLM captain in Tenerife was thinking about. If we run out of time, we get stuck in Gran Canaria. And 400 people will have to go into a hotel.
It will cost KLM a lot of money.
We will have to sleep for 8 hours and then fly home, and it'll cost a ton of money, and all those things come into play. And that's why I'm saying maybe somebody at the operations, the nerve center of an airline, should weigh in on this too, and say, listen, at one time it's enough. We will pick up the slack. We will, clean up the mess afterwards and put the people in the hotel. But people, when it's too late, they realize the immense damage that this does, because there are dead people. There is the immense grief. An airplane is wrecked. Crew members are dead. The image of the company is wrecked. Why not just call it quits and say, let's get the hell out of here?
Yeah.
But it's very hard. It's very hard when that virus takes a hold of your brain, man. It's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, it's funny. The more you think about it, the more dangerous it becomes, in my perspective. But that's my worldview, of course.
It's a percentage that that.
Luckily, most of the times it's going well. It's going fine. I mean,
that is
flying is still the safest
way of getting around.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but it surprises me that, because this will happen again and again, that nobody does actually take any action on it to alleviate this problem, to ban this, because it is possible. We can do that, and the aviation industry will benefit from it.
I'm going to fly this airplane to Lelystad Airport.
Lelystad,
because it's time. It's time to go. So how do I start the engine?
Well, the engines are running. We are in flight. You see,
we're
if
on
you move
flight
the
mode.
throttles, you see the power going up there. You see those little gauges there.
It
They're
is fantastic. Eh?
spinning up. We are in a cruise flight
Who
here.
made this? Who made this possible, by the way?